Hi, welcome to Artcasters number 117. I'm Joshua Kemble, and this is the art show that alternates between myself and Scott Serkland's channel. And we have a ton of guests today. So I'm going to just run through everybody and introduce everybody. And we'll start with, of course, my co-host of this show, Scott Serkland. Scott, can you tell everybody where to find your work?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Serkworks or Serkworks Art Labs or Scott Serkland. It should all take you to the same place, or just Serkworks pretty much anywhere on the internet. And I guess since I'm the first one going, I just want to let everyone know that the reason why we've got such a full house today is because this is the last Artcasters before the end of the Life in Space Kickstarter, which is the 100 Days of Making Comics anthology. And so if you go to 100daysofmakingcomics.com, that will take you right to the Kickstarter. And, you know, we really want to hit that $5,000, and I think we can do it in the next couple of days. So, but just awesome books. We've got a lot of awesome creators with us here. I've just got a pin up in the book, but a lot of the people we have on today actually have stories. So hopefully they can kind of let us know a little bit about, besides Gaz, who's making a funny face, who, like me, only has a pin up in the book. So, all right, back to you, Josh.
So operators are standing by. Donations are coming in as we speak. Yeah, like you guys should definitely check it out. Where can I find that again, Scott? What is that website that everyone should go to and contribute to Kickstarter?
100 days. It's the number 100. 100daysofmakingcomics.com, and that will take you right to the Kickstarter. And then somebody told me that it got featured or something, or it's a project we like by Kickstarter.
Yes.
That's super awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, there's a strong reason for that too. There's a lot of like really solid artists among all our guests. So in the book, so it's definitely a book. Like I'm not even in it, and I've supported the Kickstarter because I want the book. So, and I'm a comic geek. So if anybody watching this is a comic geek or wants to support independent comics, it's a good way to do it. All right, so let's start off. Chris McQuinlan, where can we find your work?
Hey, you can find me on YouTube, probably the best place, at Chris McQuinlan Art.
Awesome. And let's see, Patrick Brown, where can we find your stuff?
On YouTube as well, at string_cheese with a Z, because I make things complicated.
Awesome. And Gaz, where can we find your work?
Well, you can find me online just about anywhere as Gazbot. From YouTube to Instagram, I'm everywhere you want to be. Here's a bug puppet hand.
Sectars.
Classic. And then Allen Ratz, where can we find your work?
At ratzart.com.
Awesome. So we have like a full house of people, and our topic for the day that's going to tie into this this Kickstarter pretty heavily, because everybody like featured right now and featured in this book has something in common, which is finishing a pretty big project. And especially for somebody who like there are a few people in there where it's their first comic ever, and like the quality of the work is really good, and it's finished and it looks finished. And so we thought it would be cool to do kind of the art of finishing as like as a topic. We kind of addressed starting on the last Artcasters, and so there's a little bit more that goes into kind of finishing projects. So I know for myself, when I first like tried to tackle comics, not finishing was actually one of my biggest problems and one of my biggest struggles, because I would get like a page in, and then I would look at it and I'd critique it, and I'd be like, I'm not ready yet. And I was kind of waiting for like almost like an invisible gatekeeper to like open a door that would suddenly lead to like professional illustration work or lead to a finished comic book. And so I'm kind of curious, like I at least for my own experience and from a lot of people I've talked to, that tends to be a pretty common thread, where it's like a lot of people are kind of held back by the like waiting, almost like waiting for permission to finish. And I remember really vividly, like the first time that I finished a comic, and I mean like a serious comic, because of course I did like stupid comics as a kid, and they were actually not stupid. They were awesome, but they weren't like professional, and I remember like very clearly the day that it dawned on me that like you don't have to wait for somebody, like you're never ready, and you're never actually gonna like have like somebody just hit you with a magic wand and be like, you have entered the world of cartooning, so like for me, that was my experience. I don't know, I kind of wanted to hear your guys' experiences. I know that a lot of the completed work came out of the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge, which I'm like in day 20 of, and actually 21 of, or 20, I can't remember. But I'm in the thick of it, so I've gained more respect for you guys who've all completed it. And so I was just kind of curious, like, what was it like for you guys to kind of finish something like for the first time? And then what did the 100 Days of Making Comics kind of have to do with that? Like, did that help you kind of to finish this project for the Kickstarter? So Chris, like, do you want to tee that off?
Yeah, the first comic I ever finished was probably about 10 years ago, and the whole point for me to finish a comic was doing conventions. I was doing a convention for the first time, and that was actually my push back then. This is way before the challenge sort of existed, and after I finished that comic, I pretty much stopped for a long time because like you said, Josh, you sort of wait for that sort of that big gratification or someone to come and shake your hand and say, you did it, you finally did it, you're a big comic artist now. And that never happened, and I probably sold maybe like 6 copies in the whole weekend, and it was pretty disheartening. And so yeah, it's kind of put a stop to it. And it wasn't long after I started my next comic, which was The Legend of Rock, and I was having a lot of trouble really getting into it. And then that was about the same time that I was listening to Big Illustration Party Time. I was backtracking, listening to it, and then Kevin started the challenge. And I think I was sort of, I know I was a part of like the Tumblr when he first set it up, and I started doing it then, and that was really the push. But looking now, like the challenge is probably a real blessing in disguise again, like actually putting the effort into finishing a comic, or at least putting the effort into actively wanting to finish a comic, because it's a force that sort of drives me with being accountable and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like, it was really hard the first time, sort of finishing it and not getting anything in return for it, or at least, like I said, not getting that gratification. Whereas now it's just sort of purely for enjoyment, and I suppose that for me it's more the community involved around it than it is actually doing the comic sometimes. But yeah, it's definitely a struggle finishing a comic for me in the past, but now it sort of feels more of a reality, and grasping that I don't need other people's gratification. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I can just do it because I want to do it.
Yeah. And like I actually find that's a pretty strong motivation too, because like the other form of motivation, which I totally had too, it's still a motivation. I mean, like, we all like getting, good feedback from work, but like just that sort of payoff, if that's kind of your thing, like initially it was mine too, where I put out my first comic and was like, all right, this is going to change the world, and then I'm going to get an Eisner, and like I had all these ideas of like where it would lead, and like even if those things happen, that's not like a really sustaining driver to like make work, especially like artwork that you're passionate about, because the second like somebody kind of dislikes it, you'll be like, oh man, never mind, I give up, whereas the other is way more sustainable. So if you get known, or like, let's say like all the stars align and you do get like an Eisner or like a huge like deal or contract for it or something, it's like at least you'll have known through that process of kind of building it out of passion alone, you'll be able to go back to that, like, okay, that's where my center is, I don't know if that makes sense,
It
but
does make sense. That makes me think of, I mean, it's a different art form, but it makes you think of like acting or things like that. When you
yeah,
get some young actor that has like a blockbuster movie as their first movie, and
yeah,
everything is downhill from there because they didn't struggle and just learn to love the art before they got their break. So then
yeah.
they go and do a community theater play and they want to kill themselves, basically.
Exactly. Or like a one hit wonder, and then like
Right.
the rest of their albums are all crap because like they had that one thing and then like just got everything too early. So it depends. Gaz, since you chimed in, what about you? Like, what was your first experience? Like, probably far before the 100 days, but what was that like? Like the first time you actually finished a comic?
Um, well, it's not an easy question to answer because there was sort of like I did comics in high school, and like everybody, but we actually did sort of publish them. Now we only made like 100 or 2 copies, and it was me and 2 other friends, and we did them like at whatever local print, FedEx or Kinko's or whatever was around at the time, and it was great. But it was easier because there was 3 of us, so I only had to do like 12 pages or whatever, and we did like 4 of them. And as it went on, the one guy was only doing 3 pages and he couldn't keep it up for more than 2 issues. And these issues were like 4 months apart, 5 months apart, in black and white. And then me and the other guy kept going for, I think, 4 or 5 more issues. And it took us into like early college age. But it was sort of, while I definitely had that, hey, I'm going to be the next image star kind of idea in high school, when we started putting them out, I wasn't aiming for publishing them for anyone to see really, except for like my friends and family. Like I don't even think those early ones I took to a show. I don't think I exhibited at a con for years after that. It was almost, even though it was comics, it was treated more like a local zine where I was trying to get it into like the one local comic store and friends and family. And all my friends and family were like, this is awesome, you're great. And I was like, yay. So I got that feedback, but on such a small scale that it's exactly what I hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't sustainable because I didn't have the skills, and we didn't know what we were doing. We were just throwing comics together and putting them out, which is laudable because actually one funny thing is we would sell ads in them. I somehow got the idea for the second issue. I wanted to have a color cover, which meant that we would get a color like laser printer 11x17 cover. And I'm
Nice.
but we were selling them for like $1 when they're black and white, and we made like 50 cents. I'm like, well, we can't sell these for like $3, but if we get ads, it'll offset the cost. So we went around town, and this was in Red Bank, New Jersey, and got like local businesses. And I don't know what they thought they were investing in, and we weren't lying to them, but it was just like, hey, for $50, you could have a half page in this book, and blah, blah, blah. And it happened. We got enough money that it paid for the whole print run with the color cover, and got like $10 each on top of it. So
Nice.
yeah, and I do, again, I wonder what they thought they were investing in, because we were literally printing up about 100 or 200 and mostly giving them to our friends and family. But whatever. So fast forward from that to the next comic I did was years later, and it would have been wow, I'm blanking. Well, let's skip everything. Oh no, I know those. I was doing a strip in the paper, a local paper, and I would collect those. And so this is when I started going to cons. And the first con I ever tabled at was a Small Press Expo in Maryland, SPX. And I went with a buddy of mine, and my friend Mike Dawson, I'll name check him. He's like somewhat known in the indie scene, and he's really responsible for a lot of my early interest in comics and things like that. And so I would split a table with him, and maybe over the course of the week, and I was selling them for like $1 each. So even though I wasn't selling many, I might have made like $60 because just, hey, $1, why not?
Yeah.
Now, of course, that means I lost like $100 after the hotel and the table and printing, but that money was spent. So I was like, hey, I got $60. But I guess the moral of the story for both of these things, and I also did some more indie comics that time, like some bio strips and things like that, kind of like what you're doing now, Josh, but like way, way, way worse on every level. And part, not just because my skills weren't up, but also my heart wasn't really in it. I was associating with people that did that kind of work, and I said, oh, I guess this is what I should do. And so I did it because I felt like I was supposed to. And so I did that for a couple of years, the collected strips and autobio comics, and had nothing but good experiences. I didn't make any money. I didn't get any notoriety, but I had a good time going on these little adventures once a year to SPX and selling to my friends and family. So again, I didn't really have any expectations. And it wasn't until I got a professional, like I went to get a job at Six Flags, then I went to art school, and then I started getting professional work and being an animator. And then one day I'm like, why am I not doing comics? That's like what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I'm cutting out a lot of stuff because we got a lot of people, but I listened to Big Illustration Party Time like everybody else, but I listened to it when it was live. And so it went off the air. I was like, oh no, there's a void. And then one day I was like, I wonder what Kevin Cross is up to. And I just looked him up and saw the 100 Days of Making Comics challenge. And it was like, I'm doing this right now. And I started doing it like 2 days later. And that's when I started doing the Horror 4, which is my current comic that I have 2 issues out, and I'm working on the 3rd currently. And while it's taken me way longer, I mean, we're looking at 2 years and I'm just starting the 3rd issue, which makes me kind of depressed in a way. But
Yeah.
I'm very proud to have finished any of them. And the fact that I finished one was one of the best feelings I ever had in my life, finishing that first issue, because I actually did it. And I had so many projects that I started and never finished, and so many characters and ideas and stories and blah, 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 blah. And all of it's bullshit and none of it matters. And I've forgotten all of it because once I finished a comic, I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever done because I finished it. And now that I've done issue 2 and I'm doing issue 3, the fear is no longer there of like, oh, I hope I could keep going. Now it's just, I got to find more time to get this done quicker. But I know I could do it. And I know there's no better feeling than getting it done and putting it out in the world. Even if nobody reads it, even if I make no money, I know I did it. So
Yeah, so it's that's kind of amazing because like that just reflects so much on like my own experience too. Because like I did zines like with small runs of like 100 or 200 when I was in high school, and like one in particular had like the principal getting murdered, which I got in trouble for. Well, technically he didn't get murdered though; he just went into a seizure. But so but like it is weird when that transition happens where it's like you really like you're like, because I had a similar experience where I was going to art school and then it's like, okay, I got the skills, and that's the point where I was like kind of like put it on pause and waited for permission, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this the right way, like wait for Stan Lee to come in the door and go, you got the stuff, kid, but what's fascinating is like after that first book, I did have like this long pause. And I mean, that's part of what I'm even working on now. So it's very similar to what your experience is, where it's, what I'm working on now is kind of the result of like years of freelancing and just seeing not a lot of comics getting made, and like my own comics. And it is kind of amazing how much gratification there is to be gotten from like your own personal project that like literally like money can't quantify, because like I've gotten paid more from like one illustration than from like the entirety of all the comics I've made. Like one illustration's made more money.
Same.
And yet,
and that includes client work I've done where I was being paid to do comics.
For real, yeah. But like the fulfillment you get from your own thing is just like it's impossible to quantify, and it's cool that you found that. That's really awesome, because I feel like that's almost like your compass as a professional artist too. You need that like. Anyhow, that's cool. And it's cool. Like I do remember you from like early, like way back in the day at BAPT. So it's kind of awesome that we chat on these things through that, All right. So Patrick, what about you? Like, what was the experience for you of like first finishing a comic, and kind of like, how does 100 Days tie into your experience making comics?
Well, interestingly enough, my first like official finished comic is this one, the one in the anthology. I have like a dozen half-finished ones all over the internet, and like all sort of stuff, like different experimental ones and things like that. But when I first started the 100 Days, I sat down with the idea of like actually making like a printed one, like one you can actually hold in your hands, a legit comic. And I went through the 100 Days and I made a lot of progress, but I never finished that until this whole anthology project came around, and that really gave me the motivation to like the kick in the butt I needed to actually finish it, because it wasn't just like me doing it for myself, it was me doing it for others, and if I didn't, like it would be a major disappointment to just like I would feel like I failed everyone,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of like it's good motivation to have social pressure like that, and it worked because like I finished my comic. I was actually like I'm super proud of it. It's like Gaz was saying, like that is one of the favorite things I made just because it exists. It's a thing in an anthology that will soon be printed, and I will have copies of it, and that's going to be so amazing.
Yeah.
So, like, that is automatically the most exciting project I've ever done, even though, like, I'm working on all sorts of stuff still. But
None of that's real yet, though.
yeah, exactly. All of it's
Yeah.
just like, it's sort of there, especially because I work digitally, so none of it's really real until it's printed in a way.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it was a fantastic motivating factor, and like ever since completing that, haven't finished another comic, but I've been actually doing a lot more like art pieces and stuff like that, and like it's motivated me to just like improve myself, which has been really cool too.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but like I don't know when the book you were doing when you were taking the challenge, was it like a full book or whatever? Because one of the things that I think really helps a lot of people is just, and I think it helped with Mike Emmeritz too, because he made a shorter story and he was able to finish it. And when you're given that certain time frame, I mean, I think a lot of people just start, they want to tackle this big project right off the bat. And I think sometimes it helps just to pick something smaller, then you've got it finished. And then once that's done, then you have the confidence to go in and do a bigger project.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what my problem was, because I have this like big world I pictured and I've been building for years in my head, and I wanted to tell this grand story, and it was just too much to finish. Like, I still want to do it someday, but I was starting way too big for my first project. So the fact that I did a small little like bite-sized project and really got a feel like start to finish, that was way better than trying to do the monster project first.
And I think that's a super common problem. I would say, without, I'm willing to fight people on this. I'm gonna die on this point. I think the number.
All right.
I think the number one problem beginning comic artists have is that they get overambitious with the scope of their story and their strip and their book. And I've talked to so many people, myself included, where it's like, yeah, maybe your perspective is bad. Maybe you got to work in your color. Maybe, the storytelling isn't quite there. But the bigger problem is you're not finishing a story. It doesn't matter how bad it is, as long as you get it done. And I would say 90% of the people I talk to at conventions, at shows, wherever, where they're like, hey, oh, you do art, blah, they're working on their comic. It's going to come out. They've got an idea. They've got to get ready for it. And I'm always telling people, just do it, even if it is a 300-page monster, because then you're going to realize, oh, I've made a mistake. I shouldn't be doing a 300-page monster. But if you do it, more power to you.
Huge mistake.
Yes. But B, like, and I'll throw Mike Emmeritz into the bus here. He's a buddy of mine. I love him. But he had this huge epic story, and over the course of the 100 days, he's like, I'm going to do Space Cat, which is just this fun little strip. Space Cat is now a huge epic story. So, and this happened to me too. I chose my book, The Horror A4, because I thought it was going to be a 40-page one-and-done monster story. It's now 130 pages. And so even when you try to keep it small, it gets big. And just make it as small as you can and get it done. And if you can't make it small, still just get it done. But I think that is the number one problem facing all comic artists, especially new ones. That I'm done.
Yeah. When I first did Young and the Dead, it was part of Kevin Cross's other project, the Mini Comics Dump Truck, and I think it was supposed to be an 8-page story.
There you go.
And I started getting into it, and I'm like, oh, there's so much more to this. But I completed it. And I think mine was probably one of the biggest books in there. I mean, some people, like Roger Langridge is in there. He gave out like 5 different mini comics, so he blew everyone away. But I put a lot into it, and again, there was that deadline. You had to have it done at a certain time. So I completed it, and that gave me the confidence. And before that, I was in the same place, all this half done stuff, but never a finished comic. So
yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of adjust a little bit. And I think we'll agree. I think we will.
Let's fight.
Because I don't think we have to.
Okay.
So I think that you're totally right that is one of the most common problems facing like people trying to do comics or people who want to do comics. I put that in quotes because I think if you want to do it, you'll be doing it.
Right.
But I think the problem is actually preciousness more than it is scope. Like, meaning I think if your idea, if like, for instance, like my comic Numb that I got like the Zarek for, initially the concept for that was this massive graphic novel. And then it ended up being 24 pages. And that was partially from being like stepping back from it and being less precious and being like, what's the story I'm trying to tell? and realizing it doesn't have to be like 200 pages. It can be told in 24, you know?
Right.
And that ability to not be precious, a lot of that was like garnered in art school, where it's like you get used to critiques, and then you start getting like being able to pull back from your work and going like, you know what, you're right, that arm is off, you know? And I think some people get so attached to their story as this like precious magical being that they're unable to kind of pull back or also just attack it because it has to be perfect. You know what I mean? I'm all for the idea of like, I don't think it matters if it's a short project or a long project. I think you got to tackle it. And this is where I'm in agreement with you guys, is like, I think you'll take on that 300-page comic and you'll either, you know, die on your way in it, not actually die, but you'll trip and fail and be like, this was a big mistake, but you'll learn so much in that process. Or, you know, like you'll finish and end up with something.
I'll agree with you. I will agree with everything you just said. And the only reason I would still suggest not going for a big project, although I agree that, yeah, either you learn that you shouldn't or you actually do it. But here's the only reason I would usually still recommend against it, because it's one more stumbling block. And my goal when I talk to somebody is to try to get them doing it, just get them moving. And while, if I say, hey, go work on your 300-page book and they start, great. But I think there's a much more likelihood that there are other issues that are keeping them, whether it's preciousness, whether it's a 15,000 rewrites, whether it's needing research on, you know, ancient Egyptian society before they can know how their character's going to look.
Yeah.
You know, whereas if it's an 8-page story, there is no excuse. There's nothing you need to do. Just do it. So I do agree with everything you said, but at the end of the day, I just want people to start working as soon as possible. And so that's why I recommend smaller.
Yeah. And also, I mean, like that first, getting that win, like getting a little win, gives you motivation to like try for more ambitious things. So I'm in agreement with you too. We agree. This is crazy. All right. So Jay, Allen Ratz, like, do you want to talk about kind of your experience in finishing? Like, when was the first time you finished like a comic or a comic story, and like, what's your experience been? Are you there?
Huh?
Oh, okay.
Oh, was it me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Your turn.
sorry, it cut out for a moment. Sorry.
No worries.
I published my first small comic back in 1990. And it was just something like I gave out to like friends and stuff. And so in 2014, I wanted to get back into making comics, but I'd been out for a very long time. And so I started getting on the internet, looking, trying to, you know, watching videos and looking things up, trying to get a feel for, you know, the best approach to getting back into showing off my ideas and stuff. And that's when I started coming across Peter Palmiotti. He did like a YouTube. He has a YouTube channel, and he was talking about the 100 Days of Making Comics challenge, and that's how I got acquainted with it. And then I just kind of jumped in. I started out small, and I totally agree with the idea of. I had this other idea, and it was a very grand idea, but I knew that I needed to start small. So I did a 1-page comic that was called Lady of the Flame. And I was very proud of this 1-page comic because I completed it, and I was learning how to work digitally while I was doing it. So that gave me a sense of accomplishment just because I was learning as I was going. And so I do totally support the idea of, if you're learning how to do comics, you're wanting to get get into it, start off small, even if it's just like 1 page or one little strip or something, and then kind of grow from there. And then eventually you'll become more confident enough that you'll want to tackle the bigger projects.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think that's so cool, like the experience you're describing with like the first page, because it's I think that's the best way to learn, is to have like a project that, you know, is maybe ambitious. Maybe it's just 1 page, maybe it's a panel, but just kind of like, instead of waiting till you've learned perspective to draw a building, have the project of drawing the building, and then you're forced to learn it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think that's a great thing. And I think that's probably similar to like most people's experience, at least most people I've met who do art professionally too. It's like, there are so many times in my life, and I'm sure Scott, like, and Gaz and everybody here, like Chris, and like all of us have had experiences where, you know, you have a client hire you to like, you know, like draw like a crowd scene. And I remember the first time I got hired to draw a crowd scene, and I'd never drawn a crowd scene. I'm like, I can't do a crowd scene. I had a little panic, but it was due like in like 3 days. So I was like, well, I guess I better figure this out, you know? And that's the best. I think that's the best way to learn, because then you've done it. Like once you've done it, you're just like you were saying, you know, once you've completed that page, then like attacking the next page, it's like, well, I got the last page done. You know,
Well, and
it builds your confidence.
The other thing to keep in mind is if you have because I was part of the 100's Facebook group, when I would post stuff, I would get feedback from people. And, you know, and critiques don't have to be negative. They can be very positive. They can be like, hey, try this, or, you know, hey, what do you think about this? You know, and so, I mean, that's the other thing, is if you have a support group that, you know, that you can reach out to, and, you know, and kind of learn from them. And I mean, even during like when we were working on the Life in Space anthology project, when people would, you know, come into the group saying, hey, I'm having trouble with this, or I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish it. You know, people were jumping in like, hey, you can do this, or hey, try this, or, you know, and that's the other great thing about having great artists that you can rely on, is that they can be like your cheerleaders to help you move on into that next phase of your artistic development.
Yeah,
And
that's huge.
I was going to say, and to hold you accountable, because I know Mike has credited Gaz with Mike Emirates, because I think he's in the chat.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So he was saying how when he decided to kind of quit art, you kind of told him that, well, okay, you can quit, that's fine, but you can't say that you gave it your best shot, type of thing. So with people, you know, but with people like Gaz or other people that, you know, whether it's tough love or it's encouraging or whatever, with surrounded by that kind of community, that's going to help, you know, and that community continues to grow, and it's really amazing. So.
Yeah, and I mean, just coming from like my perspective of somebody who is just taking on the challenge, did my live feed go out? I think it did for a sec. But coming from that perspective, I'm amazed by the community. Like it's a good group of people, all very supportive of comics, and like I said, you want to, like, to me, I don't feel accomplished till I've posted my video on the 100 Days Facebook, and then I'm like, okay, I can go to bed. You know? So that's a good motivator. It's a good thing to have, you know, because I think when I was first tackling comics, I didn't know a lot of cartoonists, and so that was difficult, you know.
That's definitely true.
The other thing that's cool is it's all inclusive. It doesn't matter really your skill level or whatever. Everyone can do it. Everyone can take the challenge, and you're able to, you know, work with people that are levels above you. You're able to help people levels below, or wherever you are. You know, there's people in that community, and it's not. I mean, it's just, you've got all different kinds of people at different points in their, you know, whether it's a hobby, a career, or whatever. So I mean, it's just really cool.
I agree.
Go ahead.
I agree, and it's funny how it happens, because I still think of myself as like a newbie beginner, and to some people I am, but to other people I know more than they do or have more experience than they have, and I find myself giving people advice all the time that, to me, it doesn't even feel like advice. Like, well, no, everybody knows this, right? But no, because I just happen to have been doing it a little bit longer, so to me it seems obvious to, you know, to say whatever, you know, try this or do this. And I also find myself all the time giving people advice that was given to me. Most advice I'm giving, it's like, oh, this was said to me, this helped, this made sense, so I'll say it to them. But at some point, you know, that means I'm the guy giving someone advice, you know, but I'm still getting advice from other people. So it's the best place to be is right in the middle there, where you can help people and still get help from other people.
For sure, yeah. And like like it's cliche to say, but it's like the cliches are cliches for a reason. Like a lot of the advice I got when I was first starting to do cartooning, I kind of cast aside and was like, well, I'll just use a Sharpie for mine, you know? And then like you end up working your way, if you're anything like most cartoonists, you end up working your way backwards to what the original advice was. Like, hey, use these tools. And you're like, oh, bristleport is better to ink on, so I guess I'll stop using typing paper, you know?
Right.
Typing paper, I just dated myself. Scott, do you want to get into a little bit of like what your first time kind of finishing a comic project was like, and then what the hundreds have kind of done for you with comics?
I mean, I can. I mean, I just kind of feel with so many people on the show, I don't know if we want to let other people talk instead of me, but I'll try to make it brief. But so, and I probably told this story before, but as far as finishing, like I alluded to earlier, it was that mini comics dump truck, which is kind of almost sort of a precursor to the 100 Days of Making Comics in a way. It was a little different in that it was a small club, and I think back then it was this was the second round that he did, I think second or third. And it was all through the Art and Story podcast, because that's back when Kevin was on Art and Story. So I think you had to be part of the I think there was I don't know if it was a paid. Was it a Patreon? Was it Patreon back then, or I think it was before Patreon. I think it was their own little paywall that they created. But anyway, but you know, just so they figured, I guess anyone who's willing to do that and make that sort of investment or whatever was probably more willing to make comic or be in the group, because Kevin had problems with that before as far as people delivering. But the idea is that everyone creates a mini comic, and say if you've got 30 people in the club, that at the end you get 29 mini comics. And you know, some people did it, some people it didn't have the success rate as the anthology did, that's for sure. But I mean, I got a stack of cool mini comics from it, so I'm not complaining. But yeah, it was supposed to be an 8-page story, and I started it, and because it was supposed to be a throwaway idea. This wasn't a magnum opus or anything like that. I'm just like, oh, well, what's kind of simple? It'd be kind of cool to have kids versus zombies. You know, that's got to be easy to do. There's not much to it, you know. But then when I really started getting into it, I'm like, oh man, I kind of like this. And then I start plotting the whole thing out. I'm like, this could be like a series. Before it was just going to be like, you know, it's real simple. So anyway, so I turned it out. I made it a full 22-page comic book. And the original mini comics, I'm out of stock on them right now, but I took a lot of time, because that's what makes mini comics so cool, is they're like hand done. So I did a lot of cool stuff, cutting out shapes with X-Acto knives and doing all kinds of stuff, because it was just a limited run. And yeah, it was like the coolest thing ever. And so after that, I think I did another issue before the 100 Days of Making Comics, because I think issue 3 was the first round of 100 Days of Making Comics. My second round was this last one that was a year ago I started, and I'm still working on issue 4, so I'm a little behind. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it was similar to what everyone's saying about the 100 Days of Making Comics, just different challenge. And that's kind of what did it. And somewhere along the lines, I just decided, hey, I have to stop being so precious about everything. And that really changed my whole perspective and my whole world, because I could show you, you know, I've got like still unfinished first issue of my previous comic book that never finished because I took so much time with it. So I don't know, is that brief enough?
Yeah, that works. So why don't we kind of talk a little bit about what comic you chose to do? The theme was life in space.
I'm sorry. Can I just cut in 1 second before we switch?
Go for it.
Sorry, because Scott reminded me, in terms of getting things done, how accountability is so important, which has been mentioned. But when Scott was talking about back then, Jersey Droz had a thing called Sugary Cereals, which was like 8-page comics. And the idea was it was like fun Saturday morning cartoon type stuff. And he was sort of like, hey, anybody could submit, blah, 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 blah. And before the 100 days, I was like, I'm going to do this. I have an idea for an 8-page story, and I have it. I penciled it. I wrote it. It was like this goofy superhero story. And then I realized, oh, he's not updating it anymore. And suddenly all the like pressure to get it done to turn into that deadline disappeared, and I never finished it. So the accountability or a goal is huge. So like that was, I mean, it was almost done. I just needed to ink it, and I never did it because I was like, what am I going to do with it? And there was no point in my mind, and nobody knew I was doing it. So I just wanted to throw that out there real quick. Sorry.
No, it's good. And actually that segues well into the 100 days, because the one thing that pretty much everybody in the anthology has in common is the fact that that accountability of the 100 days got them to finish their work for this anthology. And so it's like, it's a collaborative effort, you know, it's, and that accountability thing is massive, because I was finding trouble creating my own, like, you know, graphic novel. And even before the 100 days, I just realized that, like, I'm going to just get in the habit of posting, like, daily a photograph of my progress. And at first it was literally just on, like, Facebook, and then, of course, a late adopter of Instagram. So now Instagram. But it's like that act of just kind of psyching myself out. Like, at the time, I didn't have quite the community that, you know, I feel like I'm kind of hopefully a part of at this point.
We'll let you know.
But I got to complete my 100 days. But yeah, like, so I didn't quite have that community built at that point, but it's like the act of just posting and like, and kind of lining myself up with, this is going to be something I do on a daily basis, and I'm going to let people publicly see that. That's a massive thing, because then you're not just letting yourself down. And half the time you are only really letting yourself down. Like, even in the 100 days of comics, like, people aren't going to totally freak out if you don't complete. But the disappointment I think you'd feel in yourself by letting down the community is really the motivator. So it's a good way to psych yourself out and get some comics done.
And there have been people that failed the challenge and came back later and were like, I'm going to do it for real. Actually, Kiki right now is doing it for her second, for that reason. And I want to say Pharaoh did it twice. A few people, like I said, failed and then got back up. And, you know, there's the old Rocky quote, you know, it's not how hard life knocks you down, it's how many times you can get back up. I suck at quoting people, but you know what I mean?
That's good though. I mean, like, that's the gist of it. And I think that, like, that's kind of why we're kind of, all of us, I think, are talking about the idea of, like, kind of the importance of finishing this stuff, because part of finishing is failing.
Yes.
So like, the process of creating is going to be filled with tons of failure and then success. And then, like, the neat thing is when you have success, like you guys have right now with the 100 Days anthology. So how was that? Was that an okay segue?
Yeah.
I was trying. So why don't we talk about, like, what you guys did? Gaz, why don't you start off? Like, what was your choice? Like, the theme is life in space.
Well, thanks for asking me. I feel like I haven't talked enough this show yet. I'm actually going to keep this short and sweet, because I just did a pinup, and I wanted to do a story. I wish I did a story, but I prioritized my own comic ahead of it. So that's why I didn't do a story. But I did a pinup, and it is of a character called Shining Star. The theme was life in space. My book is a monster book on Earth, or an Earth-like place, and it's not about space. But there is a character, a side character that is talked about that comes from space. And actually, the first appearance is in the anthology. He doesn't show up until somebody talks about him at the end of my second book, which is, you know, not even out yet technically. And so I just did a pinup of that, and I wanted to do short and sweet, and it ended up taking me like 20 hours, and I'm still not terribly happy with it, but it's done. And I am much more interested in hearing what the other people did for their stories.
Cool. Okay. I actually still think that's pretty inventive, though, because it's a way to pull and contribute to your own comic and yet also tie into the theme. So that seems like a pretty smart way to do it. Chris, what about you? Like, why don't we get a little bit of, like, what you decided to do for the Life in Space anthology?
Yeah, I pretty much saw this as a fantastic excuse to do something away from the comic that I was trying to work on, Monkey Junk, because that was, like you guys were talking about before, that was like that big epic story that's going to be, 300 pages, going to take forever, and I didn't want to tie it in or anything. I thought this is my chance to actually really have fun, get something really self-contained, done and finished, and out there. And again, having the 100 days made it easy to sort of focus my time on it. But my story was about, because I love the idea of life in space, and I'm glad that's what everyone chose. Although I was really hoping we get something like Punk or Monkey Mod or something, which would have been wicked fun. But I just went with sort of like 3 space miners who get stuck on this planet, and they're just working away, and they get in all this trouble by sort of disrupting this giant monster creature, and they've essentially just got to figure a way out. And it's just the whole thing pretty much dialogue driven in this giant 8-page chase scene of them just bickering and trying to figure out who's going to do what, because like they're not really friends. They're just kind of stuck on this planet together, and how are they going to solve this giant problem? And in the middle of that problem, they come into another bigger problem that they have to get out of as well. And I'm not going to ruin it for anyone who is going to be picking up the book, because I suppose it's sort of a little spoiler. I think that's just a little fun book. But it was great because I even got to play around with styles too, because I wanted to do something fun and easy and a little bit more cartoonier than what I'd been drawing with like my client work and other comic stuff. So I tried to loosen up and try a few things from like other artists that I was really inspired by at the time. Like Akira Toriyama was one that I was just really enjoying, like reading Dragon Ball, and Dr. Slump. I was like, I want to do a comic that looks kind of like this, but in space with animal characters, and that's sort of where all that came from. But yeah, I had a blast doing it, and I think I was having too much fun, and I was lucky that I actually was working part-time, so I kind of flew through mine. I think I finished mine within like 40 days or something. So, but watching everyone else at the same time, because I don't know how many people were doing the videos to coincide with theirs, but I know there were a few people, and watching everyone's progress, and like the anthology group that we've got watching their progress was fantastic, because it was that motivator. If I sort of wasn't feeling it, I could sort of jump on and watch someone else work on their life in space thing and get all invigorated. And we also had the hangouts, like everyone was doing hangouts at the time. And like that was almost like a daily thing. Like if you didn't jump in the hangout, it felt like your day was sort of a mess. Like something was missing. It's great. Like I'm like just talking to Mike and Marsh and Gaz, and Gaz was teaching everyone all these little tips and tricks as he does. And I remember we were watching like crazy old sci-fi movies on the hangout with Mike. Mike was just playing random movies, which was awesome. And like that whole adventure of, it wasn't just the comic that was the adventure, it was everything. It was the challenge with, I think there's 20 people, like everyone that was involved, that was also a part of the adventure of doing the challenge. But yeah, anyway, my story is about some people on a rock and they get chased by a thing. And,
I like that. That's a pitch right there. Like I actually think that's really good to highlight though, because this book does seem like a really personal book in the sense that like it's not like these people are just randomly, I mean, they are kind of randomly connected through this common thing of like a love for comics and taking the challenge and completing it. But it's like at the same time, there's a massive supportive group of people. And it kind of kills me that I never get to do the 100 days chats. Like,
I've been a part of the 100 days group for years, but I never really got involved. Like I talked to a few people here and there, but I never really got involved in doing this challenge and actually getting to meet people more face to face in a sense online. I've built up all these great friendships through that, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that'll translate in the book too, because it's like, I think it's interesting when you work with groups on stuff, because it's like you get this, you get energy and momentum from other people. And I think from looking at the comic, I can tell it seems like everybody kind of leveled up a little bit in their style too. Like the people that I followed before that anthology, like I did notice, especially in the anthology, a lot of the art just kind of went up a notch. And I think that probably comes down to like you're seeing other people completing stuff, and you're like, oh crap, I gotta I gotta up my game. You know, that's awesome. It's really cool.
When you're sitting side by side with other people that you admire, it definitely makes you lift your game a little bit.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it's cool that you mentioned that that comic, because you mentioned that recently on one of your blogs, like the same artist, Akira Toriyama. Is that how you pronounce?
Yeah.
But and Dragon. It's interesting. I do want to mention the comic is a lot like Dragon Ball is a lot different than the Dragon Ball Z we all grew up with. Like the art is like on a totally different level. Definitely worth checking out. All right. What do you like? What about you, Patrick? Like, what was your story, and like what like give us a taste of like what we read if we check it out, and spoil the ending if you can.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Spoilers for every comic. I'm just gonna go through the list. But my comic was actually inspired by a song called "Sad Machine" by Porter Robinson, and I just like it's kind of like a weird electronica sort of random stuff. And it came on my music one day, and I just suddenly had this picture of like this scene in my head. And from there, and this was before the anthology even started, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. So I ended up drawing out this like elaborate picture for the scene, and then the anthology happened. I'm like, I can expand on that. And like I have, of course, me being me, I have like a million ideas for what to do with it. And all of them are too big, but I end up focusing on kind of one little like scenario. So it's just kind of something really just kind of like a few moments in this grand story that I have like pictured. And there's no actual dialogue in it because I like to do things slightly differently. I just tried to rely heavily on just the visuals and to just kind of see if I can tell a story through just like the action and expression and stuff like that, which was a challenge because I am not super great at expressions. So that was interesting. But it's just kind of a Lost in Space-ish sort of story, being chased by robots and stuff like that, because there always needs to be a chase scene. But yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a simple little exploration.
That actually sounds more than simple, because like doing silent comics is that's a huge challenge, because you like having to communicate everything visually.
Yeah, it was definitely difficult, and that's something I want to experiment with more because it was such a fun challenge, and like I could try it and do better next time and learn more. And yeah.
That's also like just for anyone out there who may not have started comics, that's a really good short project, is try to do a comic page that's completely silent that tells some kind of story. Because you'll learn so much about sequence and visual narrative just through that activity. Like I've tried to do silent strips and failed miserably, but I've made the attempt because it's just like it's fascinating, and there's guys who do it like incredibly. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. I think anyone listening to this should go and back the Kickstarter. So
absolutely, check that out. You definitely need to check this one out.
100 days of makingcomics.com.
Where was that again, Scott?
100 days of makingcomics.com. The number 100.
All right. Okay. Jay, Allen Ratz, what was your comic about for the anthology?
Okay, so first, this poster behind me, this was a test poster I did for this one of the stretch goals. And so people that back the Kickstarter get the print, they will get that poster.
Sweet.
And also all the artists are doing artist trading cards, and this one is mine.
Awesome.
So
that's awesome.
Thing. Go over there and back it. Get the trading card set. There's like 20, and then one of the stretch goals is an artist. It's like a collection of a bit of art from all the artists on a trading card, and all of our names are on the back, and it's totally awesome. It's and the Kickstarter is the only place you can get it, folks. So you got to go over there and get it.
Awesome. Could you show that card one more time and maybe
Yeah.
mention where people can get that again? What would be the website?
It's the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge.com. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Is it
Okay,
the?
so-
I'm just trying.
It's
So I'm sure
100
we'll have a
days
link
of making
down
comics.
below, right?
There we go.
For-
We'll have the
for
link
people.
in the
Yes. So this
in the
one's
notes.
mine, but every artist made their own individual card, and I think there's a picture of them at the Kickstarter. I think I'd have to. I
Nice.
don't know if it's all the cards, but it's a large majority of them. So go check
Mike's
that
been
out. It's
updating
super
it.
cool.
Yeah, it comes out.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, that is. I mean, think about it. That's like 20 artist cards.
I
And
looked at
plus
them.
you
They
get
all
the-
look cool.
Yeah, you get the bonus card as well, so it's going to be like 21 cards. Plus,
And the
there's
backs.
bookmark-
Talk about the backs
posters.
too.
Yeah, I mean, some stuff going on over there. So go back it. But my
Uh-oh.
for
Oop.
little visual, my comic is called Europa Can Wait,
Awesome.
and
Oh,
I'm
that's
kind of
cool.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, that was really cool. I didn't realize you made a mug.
Yeah, I got a little chip in it though, right there, but.
Aw.
You know, it's an awesome mug. I still enjoy it. So I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate for not finishing a project. here.
What?
So when I was working on my 8-page story for the comic book, I was going to focus on a very short story for a character I have called Triangle Man, and I was working on the story. I had it in my head, but I just wasn't feeling it. But I was like, oh, I got to finish it. So I was trying to force myself to work on this story. And I was struggling and I was trying to force it to work. And it just wasn't. And I was just getting so frustrated. And my husband was watching 2001 Space Odyssey in the other room. So, you know how you're struggling with something and you just kind of like, you just want to get away from the computer or get away from it. So you get up and walk around and find things to do. And so I would get up and I'd kind of walk into the room and I'd watch a little bit and then I'd walk out and I'd go do something else and then I'd walk back in. And at one point I walked in on the scene where, and I'm going to be totally honest, I've never watched the movie from the beginning to the end. I've only seen bits and pieces. So I walked into the room at one point and it was where Hal had locked one of the astronauts outside and he died. And, I
Spoiler
just
alert.
kind of, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I said
I
spoiler
just
alert.
I just kind of like walked back into the other room and, I'm just kind of moseying around trying to procrastinate because I'm struggling with this other comic. And then all of a sudden I got this idea and it just started coming to me. And I just totally abandoned the other comic because this other idea was an astronaut that has, he has something happens to him while he's in space. And what happens if he encounters an alien while he's having this life-threatening problem happen to him. So, and that's just kind of how my story kind of develops. So sometimes I think you have to kind of listen to your gut on a project. And if the project is just not, if you're fighting it, sometimes you just kind of have to set it aside and walk away because maybe there's something about that story that you haven't figured out yet. Or maybe there's another story that's needing to come through and you've just got to release everything and just kind of walk away and allow that story to come to you.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant because, and that ties into the thing I was talking about with preciousness, because I think, like, ideas are not that special. Basically, what makes the execution special is like your own take on it and your passion and the way that you craft and tell the story. Like if you like wrote down the plot of Star Wars on a napkin or something, you could write it on a napkin because it's a pretty basic plot. It's just the little touches and the individual elements of it that kind of make it such a special dynamic thing that's become a part of pop culture, you know? And so like, I think if you're too married to something that you're just not that into, that's a good call. I for years worked on a graphic novel that I finished, and in retrospect, I'm not happy with, and I'm never going to release. And part of it was like, I had this whole time I was working on it, I was like, is this any good? Do I suck? Does everybody feel this way? You know, I had all these doubts, and weirdly enough, a lot of the doubts were dead on. Like it wasn't good. It was rushed, you know, and there were a lot of flaws with it. And so I totally agree. It's like, before it's tackling a comic, it is good to realize it's a time investment. So don't delay too long, but definitely pick something you want to do. And that's a good reason to do something short, like Gaz was advocating for, you know, because if you take on an 8-page story, then at least in that case, you know, the worst case scenario is you're 8 pages in, as opposed to 300 pages in when you're like, what have I done? You know?
But
So yeah,
I think that's a tactic for actually completing something, because I mean, you did complete a book.
mm-hmm.
So I mean,
Yeah,
you know, sometimes you do have to step away. But I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you ever said to yourself, well, I'm not going to make a comic for this anthology. You just kind of had to step away, and then you found what you were looking for.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, is that you have to, as an artist, you kind of have to know yourself, I guess,
mm-hmm.
because there's a difference between you've been staring at a screen for 10 hours straight and you just need a break.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between that and this project just is not jiving for me. There's a difference from that. And I think you kind of have to learn from yourself. When do I just need a break? And when is this not working? And when is it that I'm just needing to take a moment? And another thing I would almost recommend for new artists is, you know, you can do a short story. That doesn't mean that you can't do a big story and then have these little short stories that you go to when you do need a break from this big story.
Agreed.
You know, so have, you know,
Oh,
Lady of the Flame and Sci-Fi Guardian Frogs. And right now I've been focused on Sci-Fi Guardian Frogs. I actually have a comic that I totally penciled. It has the dialogue already down, but while I was working on it, something was telling me this is not ready. You need to something needs to be done differently. So I have all these finished pages, and I realized, I need a story that kind of pulls in more of the, I don't want to say it's like an origin story, but it's enough to give people like an origin idea. So I'm kind of going back and revamping things. And I think that goes back to, you kind of have to, as you develop as an artist, you'll learn to differentiate. You'll learn to tell the difference between when do I need to take a break from this project and when this project just needs to stop. You know,
yeah,
right.
I think that goes back to learning to read yourself.
mm-hmm. And I think to tie this back to the idea of finishing. Oh, is everyone there?
I'm
My screen went weird.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the thing that goes with the ties what you're saying in with the idea of finishing a project, especially if you're just starting, is this idea of when you learn that by failing, and you learn that by finishing projects. You start gauging your own output. You find a pace. You find a momentum. You also figure out how to tell if you suck or you don't. You know what I mean? Like it just, you start learning, like, generally, if your gut is telling you like, I draw feet really weird, you probably draw feet really weird, you know? And so like it's so hard to gauge. It's like trying to parse between like a critic that legitimately wants you to get better and isn't criticizing, more critiquing, and then just a critic who just wants to destroy someone. As an artist, it takes a while to differentiate. Like when I was teaching art school, I'd have students who thought that I hated them because I was telling them an honest viewpoint of their work. And they weren't used to that because a lot of students, especially in college, like they've heard from their friends, they're brilliant and they're great. And they're going to an art school. And my job when I was a professor was like to get them prepped for professional work. And so, you know, you have to be the person to break the bad news to them that they're not ready and they need to learn foundations and stuff. At first, you know, most students like hate their professors when they're getting critiques because it sucks. It's painful to hear you're not great, you know? But you learn how to parse between that, like between a critique coming from somebody who genuinely wants you to improve and then a critique by a critic who's just being a dick, you know? It's a hard thing.
Yeah, the difference between a critic and a nag.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like those are all things you need to, like, you kind of have to just get in the thick of it and get in the trenches and start fighting those battles. And then you start learning how to read yourself. Because it's hard to estimate how much time things will take. Most friends I had because I was in my friend circle, I was one of the first people to really tackle comics in my own little circle. And I had a couple of friends who were doing illustration and would always be like, oh, I should do comics. Like, and they'd talk about it like it would be an easy task. And I would always warn them, like, it's kind of complicated when you get into it. And they'd be like, nah, it's just funny books, you know, like that kind of thing. Even though they liked comics because they were getting into it. But like the second any friend I've had takes on comics, it's like this world of challenges presents itself. And it always takes longer, especially when you're first starting, than you think, you know. And if it's not taking longer than you think, you might need to level up, you know. So I don't know. That's a long-winded way of saying you are completely right.
I do think you're right too, though, that some of the best artists I know are like, oh, it's so hard. I work so hard and I'm terrible. And some of the worst artists I know are like, comics are fun and easy. It's like, I can see why you might think that with what you're creating. Are you just now noticing the chat, Josh?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's a way to kick this guy off, but I don't know if there is.
It would have to be you since you're the mod.
Wow.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, I can just hit remove. Boom.
Oh, that's a nice button to have.
Oh, no, you just deleted that message.
Okay, so how do I put user in timeout? Should I put him in timeout?
Yeah.
For those of you watching this video later, there's a weird anti-Semitic person who probably should engage in going to college on our and like learning.
I appreciate that you're giving them an ideology at all. I wouldn't even go that far.
Yeah, I'm trying not even to feed the troll, but I'm trying to figure out, should we put him in timeout or just hide him? I'll just hide him.
Put him in the corner, Josh.
Hey.
Did that work?
All his messages are gone, so I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, so he can still view the chats, but we just can't see what he's saying. So
Sorry,
dude.
I'm sure he'll just come back under his other screen name, but
Whatever. It's easy. It's an easy fix.
It's a lot of work on their end.
I feel successful though because hey, if we're getting trolled, this is a good sign, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
We're growing, Scott. We're growing. We have trolls.
yeah, I
Oh my
noticed
gosh.
I've been getting more views and stuff in my videos, and now I'm starting to actually get trolls. I'm like, all right, I made it. I've got trolls now.
Someday I'll get trolls too.
Well, you will if you try hard. You could.
Hang out in
No,
bad
I
art
think-
neighborhoods.
I think our friend in the chats who was typing such nice things that's now muted. Like you could just give him the link to your YouTube, and then he'll be all over it.
That sounds wonderful.
So yeah. So like back to that was really distracting. So
Yeah.
so back to it. So what were you saying, Gaz?
What was I saying? Oh, God.
Yeah.
I have no idea what comes out of my mouth. What was the thing you said? Because I was responding to something you said.
Well, I was just getting into kind of the gist of the idea of like, you know, the only way to kind of learn what to learn is by like trying it, you know.
I was just I'm probably repeating myself, but I was just saying that a lot of the best artists I know, either personally or famous, you know, celebrity, they always talk about how they're studying and work is hard and they're studying the masters and oh boy, I hope this came out okay, and they're amazing. And then the people I know that are not so amazing are usually the ones that are like, boy, I just busted out 3 pages yesterday, and comics sure are fun. Why do you struggle with it so much? Derp a derp a derp. And my point is like, and I'm not going to say anything to them because what's the point in like bringing down their high? But it's like, okay, well, you're always just going to do it for fun, and that's fine. But there's a reason why you think it's easy, because you're not trying to make it better than your baseline ability that you happen to have right now.
Yeah. Yeah, like basically, and this has been my experience like the whole time just doing art in general, is like you reach these plateaus where it does become easy for a second, you know?
Right.
But usually that's the point where you like are like, okay, now I'm going to tackle this crazy thing. So like, let's say you start figuring out line of action. And so you're like, okay, I'm not going to have the character cross the line of action when I'm having the conversation, so people don't think like 5 years are going by between conversations, you know? So you get the line of action down, but then it's like, well, I haven't really tackled like doing, you know, a 16 panel page. I've only done like a 4 panel page. So now I'm going to try doing pages with tons of panels that are somehow readable. And then like you tackle that, and then it's like the next challenge, because there's a million things in comics and nobody's perfected it. So it's like, yeah, I almost feel like for the friends of mine who were in illustration too, who really wanted to get in comics, like now, like anytime I talk to somebody who's like, I kind of want to try making a comic, I also feel like warning them, you know, because I'm like, understand, like you're opening Pandora's box, because like comics are addictive, and I think they're addictive because they're hard and they're complicated and they're fascinating.
But it's one of the only creative jobs where you do everything. And I say creative on purpose instead of, you know, because like if you're a director on a movie, you don't do everything, for example. But it's almost like making comics is like you're the set designer and the costumer and the writer and the director and the actor and the, you know, like you have to do everything. So you don't have to be perfect at everything, but you have to be pretty good at everything. And that's almost impossible.
Yeah, and then like once you get good at everything, there's a new thing.
Yeah,
that's the thing, you know. If you reach a plateau, like if you've gotten to a point when you're doing comics and you're having a really easy go of it, like you might want to like think about ways to up your game, you know, because like the other thing is if you reach that plateau, why keep going? If you make a perfect page, like just call it a day, you know? Like that's great.
Well, that's when you change up your style or do a whole different genre or something like that, I guess.
Yeah. Cool. So like Chris, you seem quiet. I just wanted to talk to you. So
I was thinking about this before, like I really want to interact, but I think this happens every time I am in a hangout or anything with Gaz. I love listening to Gaz and I get completely mesmerized, and I feel like it's not like I can't interact or get involved. I just don't want to allow Gaz to just keep talking.
That is the nicest way. That is the nicest way anyone has ever said I talk too much.
It's a nice break. I feel like in my videos I don't shut up, and when I'm meant to do like a 3-minute quick, hey, I drew for 30 minutes today, turns into 13 minutes of me talking about it. I don't know if anyone saw my video today where I just went on for about 12 minutes and then I clicked. I'm like, oh, I forgot to tell you guys what I did last night. I didn't even. And I was like, oh, yes, I drew for 30 minutes. And all right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
I had that exact
change.
I had that exact experience today when I was just starting to record the 100 days for today, because I'm still going to try to like do one a day even on top of this. And yeah, well, it's, you know, it's part of the challenge. But
I love you.
But like, yeah, I caught myself like 30 or 40 minutes into it in the car, and I'm like, what am I talking about? Like, nobody gives a crap about this. Yeah. What am I doing? I haven't even talked about my comic.
It's really nice though. I actually missed doing the videos so much because I'm realizing now how much I kind of just spitball ideas to myself, and I'm conversing
Yeah.
with myself and going, "Oh, I'm going to do this, and this is a great idea now. Actually, I should go do this because that's going to sort of spin off into this, and then I'm going to do that." And I'm actually finding myself way more creative and excited about just being creative and making comics or just making art and going home and planning things like opening a web store and getting my website sorted or catching up on everyone's videos. And everything about it excites me. So I think it's a good exercise just sitting there and talking to yourself, even though you're kind of talking to an audience anyway.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether they care or not, like, you know, that's what you're feeling at the time. Like, get it out there.
Yeah, and it's a good way to troubleshoot too, like you were saying, because it's like for me, I've caught myself like even if I'm in like a really dark mood, because like being an artist, it's like there's days where you're just like you post something and it gets 2 likes, and you're like, oh, I wanted like more people to like me, you know, and but it's a nice way to kind of even troubleshoot your way out of that, because you could be like, I'm kind of annoyed because I got 2 likes, and then you talk about it and you suddenly are like, oh, well, I should still make art. And you're like, thanks, friend. And it's like you're staring at a screen. but it's cool because like that's the thing I think that's so great about the video component of the 100 Days Challenge is that you actually aren't just talking to a screen. Because like when I'm vlogging now, I'm thinking of like all the hundreds people who like participate in the comments section on the vlog. You know, it's like that's who I'm like, I know some of these guys like are gonna watch, and so I am talking to them. But it's weird because I remember the first like 4 vlogs I recorded just feeling like really weird, like the whole time, because you're just talking to a camera, you know. It's weird. It's weird to get used to, but it's a good. I'd encourage anybody who's gonna take on the 100s, do it. Do the videos.
Absolutely.
It's like you were saying earlier, like you're having trouble sort of getting used to actually vlogging out in public. And I've had the same problem for so long. And I was doing it the other day when I was at the zoo. And I was just sort of thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm just going to pretend I'm a tourist. Like, if anyone looks at me, I'm just some dumb tourist from another country who's never been to this place before, and I'm filming it because I want to show my family. Like, it doesn't matter if they know that I'm vlogging.
Why do you have to be dumb? You could be a smart tourist who enjoys animals. Like,
I didn't know there were smart tourists. We only get the dumb ones down here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, okay, really good counter. Like, how many smart tourists are there, really?
I'd like to think when I was in Japan, everybody was impressed with how smart I was. I'd like to think that is the key part of that. It allowed me to enjoy myself.
That's awesome.
Meanwhile, they're just looking at you like, geez, he's awfully smug, isn't he?
And I'm like, why are there so many Australians here? Then I realized I was in Australia and I was a dumb tourist.
Oh.
Oh, man.
You should come to Australia, though. It'll be great.
Australia is like one of my top 3 places to visit, actually.
It was in my
It's
top
also-
3 till I had Vegemite.
What'd you say, Chris?
It's also one of the deadliest countries in the world. So if you leave, that's kind of like winning.
You might have just talked me out of it, actually.
I've survived this long. It'll be fine.
As long as I get to meet Mad Max.
Yeah, Chris is proof that you can survive in the post-apocalyptic Mad Max environment of Australia. Yeah, Australia is rad. I just like I'm not kidding about Vegemite. It's really weird to me, that flavor.
I'm pretty sure you can go there and not have to eat Vegemite.
No, it's mandatory, actually.
I think it is mandatory, yeah.
Off the plane, they hand you some and say, you better eat this.
And if they give it to you and you start, you have to finish, just like comics.
Good segue. I love it. You know what comic it's just like is the 100 Days of Making Comics, but you guys should all support. Operators are standing by. Where is the website?
Hiya, Han. What can I do you for? 17? 17 for 100 days? You got it. 17, Jimmy. We got 17 more. Put it on the big board.
I didn't know that's how that worked. You just shout numbers.
Yeah.
That is pretty good. I guess I have to do like the Ira Glass and This American Life. Like NPR is funded by your donations. I can't do an Ira Glass. Anybody got a good Ira?
No,
I don't, but I also have a website you might want to check out. I don't know if we've mentioned it lately. The 100 Days of Making Comics.com.
100 Days of Making Comics, keeping the pub in public radio.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
I was like, I got engaged. I was like, forget this. I'm gonna listen to this. What's this episode? What is it?
Today's story in 3 acts. First
So you have
act,
to keep up.
comics. Second act, 100 Days. Third act, give us your money.
Can you keep up that accent for the next like 16 hours of our pledge drive? Do you think?
I think it's much more likely I'll keep slipping into different accents.
Just different people keep showing up all the time. It's all
Yeah.
Gaz.
Oh, I love it. Mike just said, tonight I'm playing the role of toll-free number ticker at the bottom of the screen.
I don't know how we're going to top that. I think that's Mike.
Yeah,
just-
that was pretty
Yeah.
great.
I think
We
we've
win.
have we gone about an hour?
I think we've gone over an hour.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
About an hour and a half.
Yeah,
All right,
we
so-
go about an hour and a half. So
you know, but you guys, I'm so like worried about finishing. I mean, is it even? Should I feel like I don't know enough to kind of get this done. I don't know. What do
I
you
guess
guys
we're gonna be
think?
here for a few more hours while we figure this out.
Maybe
All
we
right.
could start another show that's like 5 minutes long in the meantime.
Yeah, they're perfect. Well, let's
I love
do
it.
a mini show, a micro show.
That's a good call. So let's do a really short vlog after this. But no, since it's about finishing, it's probably a good time to call it a day. So thanks to everybody. This went really well. I was a little nervous about having, because usually we only have like max 2 guests. And so I'm stoked, and it was cool to talk to all you guys. A lot of you guys have really wanted to talk to for a while. So it's cool to have you on the show. And
Yeah, that was awesome.
yeah, so let's sign off. Let's all kind of do the go around and give people your contact info, and then maybe we should repeat that 100daysofmakingcomics.com as our URLs as well.
You could also look that up just on Kickstarter, can't you?
Yes, that's a
Yeah.
good point.
yeah, but it's so easy just to type 100 Days of Making Comics, and it'll take you right there.
To the Life in Space anthology.
Yes.
Life in
Yep.
Space. It's an anthology. Life in Space is
Where does that take place? That life that you were talking about?
in space.
Well, how
All right.
about that?
Oh
Oh, I think Gaz disappeared.
no! A bunch of my toys just fell.
Oh no!
I thought
all right.
that was a good, like, that would have
100 Days of
been
Making
excellent.
Comics book.
You know where they wouldn't fall?
In space, they've been.
All
I fell. That's fine. We're okay. Here in space, we're having life. That's it.
right, guys,
One
thanks
act
for sharing along with our lives in space. And so let's tell everybody where they can check out all of our lives in space. Well, why don't we start with you, Gaz, since you have spacemen floating.
I do.
Where can we find your work, and where can we support the anthology you're going to be in?
Forget about that then. The anthology, well, as you know, it's on Kickstarter. It's the Life in Space comic, Life in Space comic anthology, 100 Days of Making Comics, Life in Space. But me personally, I'm Gazbot. I'm everywhere online. I'm Gazbot with 2 T's on Instagram. Everywhere else, it's just straight up Gazbot. I'm on YouTube. I like to talk. Here is what you sent that Q Ranger. Okay, let's go. Next.
All right, J. Allen Ratz, where can we find your work? Before there's another accident and scream from Gazbot's screen.
I'm sorry.
It's so good though. I love it. So Jay, where can we find your work?
You can find my work at ratzart.com. That's RATZART.com. And make sure you go and support our anthology. Get yourself some cool trading
Cards.
anything. There's original art even available. So go over there and get some art. Get some life in space.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's a beautiful trading card. Who wouldn't
It
want to
is.
own that? I want to go to the 100daysofmakingcomics.com and support that at 100daysofmaking.com.com. All right. So Chris,
Sure, that
where can we
works.
find your work?
You can pretty much find me anywhere online at Chris McQuinlan Art. I'm pretty sure you've got a link down below because people have trouble spelling it, but it's down there in Josh's links. But you can also find me on 100daysofmakingcomics.com in the anthology, and there's a card and the names on it. And then if you buy it and you buy the book, and then you get the little card and it's got my name on it, and that's how you'll figure out how to spell it. And then you'll go onto the internet and then type that into the internet, and then you'll find me online. And that's probably the best way you can do it, I think, is if you buy the book and then get the card and then Google the card.
Yeah.
What?
I think that's brilliant. In fact, there's so many
You want me to
artists.
explain that again?
What's
Yeah.
up? There are so many artists in the anthology that if you get all of the cards, you could learn how to spell all of their names and go to all of their links. So all you really need is the 100daysofmakingcomics.com and go there, get the trading cards, and you've got a link to a whole gateway of artists. So Patrick, where can we find your work?
I am on YouTube at string_cheese, and that's cheese spelled with a Z. Also, like string cheese on Twitter as well. And you could also find my work. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the 100daysofmakingcomics.com. My work's in the anthology there, so I also have a card with my info on it. So that's also a good way to find me. So I feel like that'd be the best route, honestly.
All right. And at this point, I usually, introduce myself. So you can find me 100daysofmakingcomics.com, at quarterlystories.com, 100daysofmakingcomics.com, and you can find me at, on this channel. So you probably know where to find me. And we'll just have Scott close it out. Scott, 100daysofmakingcomics.com. Where can we find you?
You remind me of Mr. Subliminal. So 100daysofmakingcomics.com. You can find me at circworks.com, 100daysofmakingcomics.com. Remember that Kevin Nealon bit? From
I'm
SNL?
conducting. I'm conducting you.
No. So anyway, so you can find me Circworks pretty much anywhere on the internet. I'm on YouTube. That's kind of the main place I am. But other than that, I think we've mentioned it enough, but I'm going to mention it it might not be the last time, but 100daysofmakingcomics.com. Take you to the Kickstarter. Chris, how many more days do we have? When does the campaign end? Do you know?
3
Three?
days.
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, you're one of the guys that's supposed to be in charge of this whole thing, so I figured you know.
Just Mike's been doing so well. I figured I'd just give.
I know we're
I'm
probably
going to hop on the internet and go 100daysofmakingcomics.com, and then I'm going to find out for you.
all right.
We-
You don't have much time.
You guys, our operators are standing by and letting us know that
Okay,
there's 2
Sunday
days
at midnight,
left.
Central Standard Time.
2 days left. 2 days
Oh,
left.
today was the third of the 3 days. I guess we're already done though.
Okay. So yeah, time's running out. So yeah, definitely check it out. I mean, just go there, check it out. I think once you watch the video and once you see what all there is, I mean, yeah, you're gonna want a piece of this. So, I guess I just thank everyone in the chat. It's kind of cool to have this big of a crowd, and in the Hangout and in the chat. The chat seems popping and popping. What was I going to say?
No, that chat seems popping. They're like some weasels up in that chat. They be
You know
popping.
what? Popping is an upgrade, right? Popping's
All right.
better than anti-Semitic. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's
thank
true.
you.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. But anyway, so just as far as this show goes, the way we do it, we try to do it weekly. Sometimes the day changes. Sometimes it's Wednesday. Sometimes it's Thursday. It's been Thursday for a while. It'll probably continue to be Thursday. But if you want to know where we're on, because we rotate from Josh's channel to my channel back and forth, the best way to do that is there is a link in the description for sectards attacking Gaz.
Don't worry about that.
There's a link in the description to our newsletter. We send that out usually about 30 minutes beforehand, and so you can. If you sign up for that, you'll know where to find us. And I'm a little distracted, so because we got a puppet show going on.
I'm not doing anything now. I stopped for like 30 seconds. I've been good.
So I don't. Back to you, Josh. Back
All
to
right.
you in the studio.
Should we finish? Are we ready? Am I ready to finish? Can we do that?
I think so.
I think we're ready.